Member for Fong Lim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise tonight to talk again about my expansive Fong Lim electorate, which has residential areas like Stuart Park and Bayview and Woolner and the Narrows, and industrial areas like Berrima and Wishart and Winnellie, and even special purpose areas like the Charles Darwin National Park and Hidden Valley. But tonight what I'd like to focus on is Coonawarra and Eaton and East Arm Defence and Defence Service adjunct precincts, which we don't often talk about in this House enough as far as I was concerned. Thank you, Member for Drysdale. I do so to underscore the significance of defence investment for our economic futures. It will be critical to us realising a prosperous economic future. I had the privilege a few weeks ago on the 24th of January to join the Chief Minister in her capacity as the Minister for Defence Industries for her launch of NT Defence Week, which included also Defence Industry and Defence Veterans Awards launches. And we gathered at Shore Barge, which is a business down on East Arm, a marine logistics firm with experienced vessel masters who operate landing barges and execute safe landing beachings and wharf moorings. The stakeholders at that session were the kind of people who already know, in many ways, how important defence is to our future. We had people there from the Army 1st Brigade, from Master Builders, from ICNNT, from the Chamber of Commerce, the Australian Industry and Defence Network, Charles Darwin University, and the NT Indigenous Business Network, as well as, of course, hardworking public servants in Defence NT. Now, the thing is, that's preaching to the choir to some extent. A group of people who understand just how important defence industries are to us. The reason I rise to speak in some form tonight is, again, to talk about the economic multiplier effect of defence industries and defence investment. Our government is focused on trying to stimulate economic growth, and that is the right strategy. And one of the 5 areas we are concentrating on trying to stimulate that growth in is defence. And it's really important to understand just what a potent economic multiplier effect defence spend has in the Northern Territory. In fact, disproportionately large relative to any other industry, in fact. ICNNT, who I think all of us across the chamber will agree provide very good data for us to work with comparatively in understanding supply chains and logistics and business in the Northern Territory, estimate that almost 70% of reported contracts in defence over the past 7 years have gone to local companies. Local companies, not FIFO, not fly-by-night, but locals. That, if you translate that, is something like $800 million. $800 million of the total $1.15 billion spend that's been circulating through the NT economy. So defence doesn't just spend in little pockets by themselves. They end up chipping into our businesses, our shops, our contractors, our supply chains, and it's critically important that we do everything that's required to make sure that we secure our defence future. Now, why do I say that? Because it's not a sure thing. But let's drop back a step. Last August, Aysel Allen commissioned this report. This report was commissioned and Aysel Allen produced it, The Economic Impacts of Defence Infrastructure in the Northern Territory. This is a great bit of reading, once again, for those of you who are looking for a bit of light reading on understanding how to improve our economic prospects. It's an excellent overview of the economic, defence industry and construction industry landscape and how they all intermingle together. And this report, if it is to be believed, and it may be a little on the optimistic side, I'll admit, in some regards, still points a very, very rosy picture of just how important defence industries are here. According to this report, the defence sector is expected to invest up to $6.2 billion into the Northern Territory by 2027, potentially contributing $800 million per annum to the current levels of construction activity as well to the top end. According to this report, the defence sector could create upwards of 7,000 jobs in the Northern Territory, 4,000 plus directly in construction and another 3,000 plus across the economy. And according to this report, it could add almost 5% to gross state product. If the NT, that is, can sustain high levels of local investment. And that's the key here. What we want is a defence future where defence have a footprint in the Northern Territory. And what we want to move against is the prospect of a FIFO defence future, which is a real risk unless we lobby the federal government to ensure our defence security going forward. Now, there were two overall findings in this report that are worth briefly just noting. The first is that the NT construction industry does have a track record of delivering on industry needs. So even though we have workforce limitations here, when we need our workforce to kick in, it does kick in. And NT civil works capacity is underutilised and ready to deliver projects. And if you look at Sea-Doo, Denala, if you look across the harbour, you can see that we can deliver. The industry locally, including businesses in East Arm and in my electorate across Fong Lim, have the capacity to scale up when we need them to scale up. The second thing, though, is more alarming, and that is that the overall finding was that policy action is required. It's needed to address the constraints. And four of the findings at the very end of this, findings 15 to 18, are worth reflecting upon. Just very quickly, we need a workforce strategy for the construction industry. We need to address barriers to temporary and permanent migration. We need a Northern Territory population strategy. We need accommodation shortages to address building a local workforce. So these are issues that I've consistently brought up, and I bring them up because they do impact on our defence future. We have staff retention issues which have been used as a justification for scaling down troop numbers in the north. And this government is committed to improving livability in the Northern Territory, which is a critical part of making sure that defence wants to be here as well. I'm not the only person saying these things. People who are passionate about advocating in this area, like Dr. John Coyne at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute and Dave Malone, who former CEO of Master Builders, have been writing about it for a long time in things like The Strategist and in ASPE. And I would encourage you to look into some of these things that they've written. To build its future, Northern Australia needs clarity from defence, reflecting on, for example, Bandiana being a long way from the Northern Territory and the decision conveying a lack of commitment to North Australia, or taking defence beyond the barbed wire in North Australia, which again points out that a fly-in, fly-out model for defence operations is something that's being bandied about if we don't push harder to fight our corner. Likewise, that the real challenge is ensuring continued work for those who need to stay in the north when it comes to defence being employer of choice in the construction workforce space. But probably the single most important thing that I want to reflect on here is that Australia must think more about defence's position in the nation's north. And a line from here saying, and I quote, "Somehow and quickly, given the urgency articulated in the Defence Strategic Review, we need to get better at linking everyone to be more organised and to avoid simply using a model that assumes activities will self-organise. It won't happen by accident, and it would be a mistake to think that defence will just land here even if we don't try for it. The fact of the matter is, don't assume defence investment will come automatically due to existing bases or what was written in the Defence Strategic Review. It's wishful thinking. That's the truth of it. Delays and reprioritisation of defence works are evidence of that. A good recent example is the shifting of helicopter assets and support workforce to Townsville. Now, those are the kind of things that we need to lobby to make sure don't happen. The Defence Strategic Review is ultimately a wonderful document, but the gap between the rhetoric of it and the reality of its implementation in the north is wide. And it should matter to everybody in this House. It should matter to everybody in this House. We will have to work with the federal government to make sure that we fight our corner when it comes to defence. Defence spending is highly political, and funds are being redirected to southern states for economic and political reasons. And we need to actively lobby defence and the federal government to secure defence investment and see actual follow-through on the Defence Strategic Review. Our government, I'm really pleased to say, is committed to realising the potential of the Strategic Review in conjunction with the federal government. And those range of stakeholders at Shorebarge at East Arm the other day, you can tell the shift in optimism, knowing that we have a government committed to fighting our corner on defence with a Chief Minister who also represents defence industries. The next probably sensible option and opportunity for all of us to do something positive in this space will be NT Defence Week, which is coming up at the end of April. And so I would encourage all of you to try and add it to your calendars and your schedules, because it is important that we put on a united show to say the defence matters to the Northern Territory, not just in terms of personnel, but in terms of businesses, supply, contracts, and the entire defence ecosystem. It's an opportunity to engage with the area, with the sector, with the families, with the suppliers, and for me personally, an opportunity to generate greater engagement and exposure of local defence businesses, particularly those based in the Fong Lim electorate for whom I will be advocating. So on that note, Madam Speaker, I thank you and the House for your indulgence.